My apple spice cake recipe with cream cheese frosting is going to be absolutely incredible. By using a box cake mix as the base and using fresh apples to make homemade applesauce for the batter, this cake is going to be easy and delicious. Here in this bowl, I have one 15.25 ounce box of white cake mix, along with one small 3.4 ounce box of instant vanilla pudding. Like I said, I am going to add some homemade applesauce. Here I have 1 cup or 240 grams of my homemade applesauce. You could use store-bought, but I highly recommend that you follow the recipe I'm going to link below so that you can make your homemade applesauce. You can tell it's really thick. All I did is I took just under a pound of apples, golden delicious apples. I cut them up, mixed them with some lemon juice, and I microwaved them for 15 minutes. Then I took my immersion blender and pureed them. This is definitely the secret ingredient. I'm also going to add some butter. I am using 4 tablespoons or half a stick, also known as a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter, and a 1/4 cup of sour cream. I'm using full fat sour cream, 60 grams. You could use low fat, fat free, does not matter. If you want to make this vegan, use vegan sour cream and replace the butter with a 1/4 cup of oil. I'm also going to add 3 eggs, and of course for vegan, use a vegan egg replacement. I am going to add some spices. I am going to use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ginger, and a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. I'm also going to add 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. This recipe is super easy. The first step is melting the butter. Oh, and I also have 1 tablespoon of water off to the side. I may need it to loosen up the batter. This applesauce is kind of thick. We'll see. Like I said, the first step in this recipe is melting the butter. So I'm going to do this in the microwave and I'll bring you back. My butter is now melted and I went ahead and dumped the cake mix and instant pudding into the bowl. So now I'm ready to start mixing the batter. I am just going to literally pour everything in, the melted butter, but I'm going to leave the eggs for the end because the butter is hot and I do not want to accidentally cook the eggs by adding them to the hot butter. The applesauce, the sour cream. If you don't have sour cream, you could add 1/4 cup of buttermilk, some Greek yogurt. I highly recommend that you add something acidic because it's going to help create an acidic environment in the cake batter that's going to make it lighter and fluffier. So it's going to help the texture. Also going to add my lemon, and actually I'm going to see if I can swirl around the lemon juice to clean out this sour cream a little bit. Spices. My vanilla, and honestly, like I said, I was right. I think I'm gonna need a tablespoon of water. I'm gonna add in my eggs, and then I'm going to get my electric mixer so that I can beat everything together. I'm actually gonna go ahead and add another tablespoon of water, so we'll say 2 tablespoons of water. I just think that batter is going to be too thick without it. Now I'm going to take my handheld mixer and just blend everything together. I just finished mixing the batter. It took probably 30 to 45 seconds. I'm glad I added the extra 2 tablespoons of water because I think the batter needed it. I have already prepared my 8-inch cake pans. Now I am just going to put the batter into the cake pans and bake I'm going to use a food scale to weigh the cake pans to make sure they both have the same amount of batter, but you can just eyeball it. That's totally fine. I just finished leveling the batter in the cake pans. I use a spoon to smooth the batter out. Now my cake is ready for the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. I just pulled my apple spice cake out of the oven. It was in at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered for 45 minutes. My apple spice cake layers are now out of the pans. They're completely cool, so now I'm going to put on the cream cheese frosting. This is my no butter cream cheese frosting. That is absolutely fantastic. You can find it here on my YouTube channel or on my website. I'm just going to put some on top of the bottom layer here, spread it out, put on the top layer, and then continue frosting. I just finished putting the cream cheese frosting on my apple spice cake. Although you could serve it immediately, I recommend covering it and chilling it in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours, if not overnight. I know it's tempting, but a little bit of extra time will allow the flavors to blend together very nicely. My apple spice cake with cream cheese frosting is now ready to serve, but since it is a spice cake, before I do, I am going to sprinkle some extra spices on top. Here I have half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a quarter teaspoon of ginger, and an eighth of a teaspoon of nutmeg. That same ratio that is inside of the cake. I'm just going to sprinkle it on top. I may not use all of this. We'll see. Probably only need a quarter teaspoon of cinnamon, an eighth of a teaspoon of ginger, and a dash of nutmeg. So I accidentally made too much of the spice mixture. It all depends upon how much spice you want to put on top of the cake. This cake smelled great when it came out of the oven and looked incredible when it was fully assembled, so I couldn't wait to cut the first slice and take a bite. Honestly, my apple spice cake recipe with cream cheese frosting turned out absolutely great. I made an apple caramel cake a few years ago that was similar to this cake, but honestly, this one was a lot more flavorful. As I said at the beginning of the video, I think that my homemade applesauce is the key ingredient in this cake. It was super thick and had a lot of apple flavor, much more so than store-bought applesauce or even apple juice. In regard to the spices, the combination and amount was absolutely perfect, enough to complement the apples without overpowering them. I really liked the cool tanginess of the cream cheese frosting, but honestly, I think that a lot of things could work, especially some sort of caramel frosting. I also really liked the texture of this apple spice cake. The cake layers were soft and moist, and the little bits of apple that were in the rustic homemade applesauce gave some nice texture as well. While not totally necessary, I think that the extra sprinkling of spices on top of the cake was a nice final touch as well. And in addition to being delicious, this apple spice cake was really easy to make because I started with a box of white cake mix. You could use spice cake mix if you wanted, but honestly, I usually like to work with white or yellow cake mix because then it's a blank canvas that I can add whatever I want to. Overall, I really liked this apple spice cake recipe with cream cheese frosting. It definitely had more apple flavor than the apple cake that I made a couple years ago. However, even though this was a success, I still want to experiment with the concept of an apple cake. As I already said, this apple spice cake definitely had more apple flavor, but honestly, I was expecting a little bit more. Unlike a pie, getting a really strong apple flavor to come through in a cake isn't as easy as you would think. But I do have some ideas as to what could be done to make the apple flavor stronger. First of all, although the homemade applesauce in this recipe was a key ingredient, instead of making it in the microwave, next time I might try baking the apples in the oven. Whatever it is, baking things in the oven and getting a little bit of char seems to bring out the flavor a little bit better than steaming, boiling, or microwaving, so I'm going to give that a try. Secondly, going off of the coconut pineapple cake I made earlier this year, I think that adding some sort of apple filling, maybe apple pie filling to this cake would definitely up the apple flavor. One thing that I did want to mention is that this was an apple spice cake. It was primarily an apple cake with spices, not a spiced apple cake that was primarily spices. If you want to spice your cake, use the same three spices, cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg, but increase the amount to 1 teaspoon each. Even though I do think I would like to continue experimenting with this recipe in the future, my apple spice cake recipe with cream cheese frosting was definitely a success. If you like Southern style layer cakes with cream cheese frosting and you want to try something different that's perfect for fall, this is the cake for you. It would be perfect at any fall gathering or even for the holidays like Thanksgiving or Christmas. If you make this, I know you'll like it. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.